Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Majority Podcast, Scotland's number one anti-nationalist show, going out live on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'm your host, Mark Devlin, and I'm here with my co-hosts, Niall Fraser and David Griffiths. What are we going to be talking about tonight?
Tonight, we will all be talking about Nicola Sturgeon's Years of Failure.
Yes, and I can't wait. Years and years of failure are going to be dissected in the show tonight.
That will keep us busy for some time. And now, what are you going to be talking about?
I'll also be talking about Nicola Sturgeon's Years of Failure. It feels like leap years.
Double edition. And I'll be rounding off tonight's discussion with a talk about the most boring people on the planet, and that would be Scottish nationalists.
And of course, you can't forget the most pivotal part of the show, the most favourite part of the show, Zoomer of the Week is coming up.
That's right, and it is, and we'll be back in just a moment. Right, as always, we start with a shout out to our donors, people who made this possible. That's you watching. We did the crowdfund and raised money to start the podcast, and many people are contributing right now to keep it going every week. And you can put in a monthly or a one-time donation at the Majority's website. And I'd also like to do a shout out to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation, their Facebook pages that let us distribute the podcast on the page. And many of you are watching from there. So thank you very much for that.
And of course, don't forget, you can also watch on Twitter and on YouTube, from where you can subscribe to The Majority.
Yes, and please don't forget to like, share, comments, tell your friends. You can extend our reach at the very click of a button. Good comments get read on the show. Please do keep them short so we can fit them on the screen. And we'll try to get as many read out as we can. Thank you.
And the comments are already coming in from you lot. So please, it's good to see many of our regular viewers are here with us tonight, and we're looking forward to your comments. Tonight we're going to be talking about Nicola Sturgeon's 7.5 years of failure, plus the years before. That's coming up just a moment. Right, David's going to lead off with this.
Indeed. So yesterday marked the day upon which Nicola Sturgeon became Scotland's longest serving First Minister. 7.5 years. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. It seems a hell of a lot longer, guys. So it's time to reflect on her successes and her failures. So, guys, when you ask nationalists what has been the First Minister's biggest achievement to date, what do you hear, Niall? What do you hear?
Well, for me, her biggest achievement is dividing Scots to the point where the whole Scottish political scene is now toxic and a hostile environment to almost everyone that inhabits the space. It's just mental.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Niall there, and that I think her legacy is certainly one of division and polarisation of Scottish politics. I think we're all aware that there was a chance after the 2014 referendum that after the Nationalists had lost, that they would say, okay, that's us for an actual generation, and maybe go on about the day job, try to improve Scotland's services, and say we've got 20 years to make a case for an independent Scotland. Instead, what they did was they ran everything into the ground, blamed Westminster, and divided the people even more.
Yeah.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. That seems to be the way of it. Just they thrive on division. They thrive on upset, disharmony. It's appalling, really. So
it's their lifeblood, David. It's
indeed,
their lifeblood.
Indeed. Such is the lot of nationalists. But in fairness, let's look at some of the successes that nationalists tell us Nicola Sturgeon has made. The first one, the one you consistently hear is baby boxes. These are cardboard boxes given to families who are about to just have a baby. Now, we know that many of them have been immediately discarded because it's just a box after all, and they are currently filling up landfill sites. So that's really not much of an achievement, let's be honest. Free prescriptions is one which is constantly trumpeted. Now, as we know, throughout the rest of the UK, 80% of the population receive free prescriptions. So that's not really much that you can say different there. One that you hear latterly, I heard a lot this week, is free sanitary products, which the SNP devised and delivered. This was a Monica Lennon Scottish Labour initiative.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Yeah, which the SNP initially blocked and opposed. But it was only when they received such bad press that they turned 180, went along with it, and now they've cynically presented it as their own idea. And of course, what you have to say,
I think that's they like to do that. They're a bit like political magpies. They steal other people's ideas, virtue signal about them, and maybe they do them. Sometimes they might do them. Sometimes they don't. In the case of the period products, they stole that from Labour, as you said.
Yeah.
But many of the other policies they steal, I think we even talked about this last week, where they take a policy, they'll virtue signal about it, and then they won't actually do the thing that they say they're going to do. You can see that in the treatment of the way they treat young people's mental health, for example. Always going on about we're the party of youth and so on. Yet they won't put the funds into young people who have to wait, 2 years to get into a mental health facility or to see a doctor about that. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's really shocking.
Absolutely right. The whole treatment of mental health has been quite disgraceful, in my opinion. In fairness to Sturgeon, one undoubted success is that she consistently tops polls as the UK's most popular political leader. But then again, when you consider who she's up against, Mark Drakeford, Michelle O'Neill, Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, and does anyone know who Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsay are out of interest?
I have no idea.
I thought that would be the case. They are respectively the joint leaders of the English and Welsh Green Party. So the reason you've never heard of them is because neither one of them is an MP. Now, let's not forget the English and Welsh Green Party has no connection whatever with the Scottish Greens, who are, of course, SNP politicians.
Well, I mean, you talk about the approval ratings, but the approval rating isn't all that good. I saw an article the other day, which I haven't put out here, but it basically said that she had dropped, however many points. Of course, the high watermark, as it were, was when she was doing her daily political broadcasts during the COVID lockdowns, and everyone was forced to listen to her for an hour a day or whatever it was, and that and continually lying to her viewers that she was doing a better job than Boris Johnson. Absolutely. And at that point, to many people, many Scots who didn't really know much better, they went along with that. But
they lapped it up.
Yeah, they lapped it up. But now her approval rating is very low, and I noticed that it's just a few points above Anna Sarwar, for example.
That's true.
I think hers was 6, and his was 4 or something like that.
Yeah, it's
that type of level.
Closing all the time. I mean, in fairness to her, she has topped the polls. She isn't doing so as consistently now, and the gap is narrowing. You're quite right. And to be honest, I think that's about it for the successes, apart from, of course, winning elections, which she has been able to do. And the failures, guys. Well, let's start.
So this will be a big list, David. This will be a gigantic list.
Just up the coast from where I sit right now, there are 2 rusting ferry hulks in Port Glasgow, which have been sitting there since they were launched, since the first one was launched 5 years ago, in a state of complete unreadiness for being seaworthy. And the latest indications are they will never be ready because the faults are so endemic, they're so fundamental that they are practically unfixable. So who knows? But let's just say that's not going to happen anytime soon. So the ferries, one disaster. Trains, of course, Scotrail has been nationalised. That took this week. The new timetable, about which we would talk later, but absolutely disastrous consequences so far under the SNP's watch.
Just a second there. I'm going to go back to that. I pulled up that article there, which was...
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
I'd put up, which was actually, it's not just about the ferries. It's about ferry cancellation misery here. Uist suffers 3 months of ferry cancellation as angry communities appeal. We have all these ferries... ferry scandal, we'd like to think is that these two scandals are unbuilt and there's a huge amount of
Quite right.
money being
It's not
wasted.
just that.
But
Yeah, you're right.
it's beyond, far beyond that. It's a whole transportation sector. And, I think so. I just wanted to point that out.
No, you're quite right. I mean, the island communities have been appallingly served by the SNP government since they've come into office. And I think the two rusting ferries are just, if you like, the classic example of how badly they've set about doing this stuff. Massively over budget, massively behind schedule. Still no sign of being completed. But that notwithstanding, the services on the ferries between the mainland and the islands, really, it's simply not fit for purpose. And it doesn't matter how many new ferries you built to replace the old ones, it's still not a good enough service, and it's still leading to a lot of the problems you discussed there earlier, like mental health issues, like places like Millport, for example, where there is terrible trouble with mental health and consequent drug abuse. So really appalling. And you're right, and their record with transport generally has been disgraceful. Trains we'll talk about a little later. Prestwick Airport continues to cost Scottish taxpayers millions for an airport which has next to no flights. I drive past Prestwick Airport twice a week. It is the occasion. It is the absolute exception when you see an airplane on the tarmac or in the air or landing or taking off. The car park is almost always 2/3 empty, and this is the height of summer season or beginning of summer season. So appalling. And let's not forget smelters. Loch Aber no more, as they say. Let's not forget this is the Scottish government which has issued guarantees totaling £586 million to a company to enable them to buy this plant, and that company to which the Scottish government has guaranteed this sum of money, this eye-watering sum of money, is currently under serious fraud office investigation. So nice pick there, Nicola. Shocking. You can't see she wasn't born. We know she was born.
I want to. There's a comment here from Ray Felder. He says the Ferry Islanders keep voting SNP. It's mental. They don't actually. They vote generally for
Aaron changed.
For Lib Dems and independents. We had a discussion about this today at our weekly lunch before the show. It is a thing. I mean, of course, some people are voting for SNP over there, but it's not good. Considering all that's been going on. I mean, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They do get quite a lot of independent councillors and Liberal Democrat SPs and MPs in the islands, but there are some islands which still do vote SNP. Western Isles do, for example, or whatever ridiculous name they give it, Gaelic name which nobody can pronounce. What it says, the census, the Scottish census. How difficult is it to run a census? You go around houses and see who lives here. That's it. But no, they couldn't get it done. So by the end of the deadline, they had received 78%, I think it was, of entries completed. So they've spent, I can't remember how many more million extending the deadline, and it's still going to be below 90% when the deadline is reached, which I think is on Tuesday of next week. So well, if you can't run a census, really, what can you run? Let's not forget.
Well, didn't she say that? I'm trying to look it up right now. Didn't she say that it wasn't even going to be valid anymore?
It needs a certain threshold. Yeah.
Yep. The census may be useless. She's admitted that.
Maybe worthless. Here it is. Here it is. Here. Sorry.
Right.
Coming up. Some point. Okay. Get that in a second. Yeah. Census. Scotland census could be worthless. Nicola Sturgeon admits. More than 450,000 households still to complete survey despite deadline extension. And we all know that this is something that just really wasn't necessary. We could have had England and Wales did their census last year. The Scottish government had the option to go in with that one, but they refused. They changed all the questions. They did their own thing. Did their own marketing, ended up costing, I think, was it 70 million or something? I don't know. Yep. Just completely unnecessary spending. And now she says, it could be worthless. What's this? Well, 148 million pounds.
Yes, for a product that is going to prove zero value whatsoever. All this hundreds of millions of pounds, and it will potentially be worth zero. A big donor, nothing.
Let's not forget, half the reason that there was such a low uptake is some of the questions were utterly absurd. We went through it on here. So,
yes, of course.
Total waste of time. Far more seriously, this is drug deaths, the highest in Europe. Scotland's drug death death rate is the highest in Europe. Just think of that for a second, guys.
It's shameful,
And of course,
David. It's such a source of shame. It's unbelievable. And the fact that we've not got resignations over this is beyond me. It truly is outrageous. I mean,
and let's not forget now, this came as a result of the SNP government slashing the spend on drug deaths and the treatment of drug abuse. And they've come up with all this, frankly, bizarre, exactly the very word, ideas about not calling people drug addicts, not calling it substance abuse, but calling it something much more friendly. I don't know. And then her solution, of course, to the drug problem, Nicola Sturgeon's solution, is shooting galleries, which is where substance abusers can go and take their illegally acquired drugs in nice, clean surroundings. Well, that's great. But
let's not forget
go ahead.
naloxone. So naloxone was brought in as an anti-overdose drug to try and curb the amount of overdoses that were happening in Scotland. But it doesn't address the fundamental issue of why the overdoses are happening. We're just trying to avoid them. Right. So it's putting a plaster over a wound. It's never going to work.
Well, it just seems that there's no actual deep thought on these things. They seem to have commissions about it, plenty of people employed, but there's, I mean, if with that amount of deaths, you think they would have an emergency commission, it would be in the public eye. They would say, look, we really need to save these people, whatever it is. We need to do something and show that we're doing something. But they don't do anything, and every year the numbers go up, and they're kind of like, well, what can we do about it? Oh, I don't know. It's like, and even people are dying. And nobody knows. Everyone in Scotland should know why this is happening. We should know: is it because of poor quality street drugs? Is it because of certain gangs? Is it because of this? We don't know. Nobody knows.
Absolutely,
that's what we should be knowing at that level. We should have the information. It should be a public. It's a public health emergency.
Quite. I mean, we went into this a few weeks ago, and it emerged that the over 50% of Scotland's drug deaths are being suffered by methadone users. Methadone, of course, being a drug that is prescribed to get people weaned off heroin, and half of the drug deaths in the country are being caused by prescribed drugs. I mean, honestly, somebody should be in jail because of this. It's utterly unbelievable. Anyway, so that's a clear failure. And of course, much more prosaically, Nicola Sturgeon managed a feat which even Adolf Hitler couldn't at the height of the Blitz. And she managed to close Scotland's pub. She took great delight in doing so and was very, very reluctant to open them up again. So it's quite a litany there, guys, I would have to say. So yeah.
Well, okay, let's have a look at some of your comments. And what do you think is our main failing? I mean, we haven't even mentioned, for example, education. I think that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, because she said, "Judge me in education." I have the headline right here somewhere or other. Let me see. There it is. There's the one. Here it comes. Right, judge me on education record. Now the record is so poor that they've actually stopped putting the results onto international tables. And they talked about increasing or decreasing, I should say, class sizes. And that's basically not happened. There was a report about that the other day. But nobody cares. I mean, do they? I mean, we care.
Right? We care.
As parents and people in society, and people who know people who have had issues with drugs, and people who see the homeless, and it's not as if ordinary people don't care about these issues. They do care about them, but unfortunately, there's a group of people in this country who care more about fantasy independence than the actual real life problems that are happening to people. And that's why things are going down, because it doesn't matter how far these things go down. More drug deaths, that doesn't matter. That's a price we can pay, for independence. And that's the basic way these people are thinking. They may not think they're thinking that way, but that's how they actually, what it comes out as. They say, road to hell is paved with good intentions. And they say, this is a noble endeavour. Our focus is on Scottish independence. When all around them, the place is burning down to ashes, people are dying, people can't get to the ferries, to the islands and the ferries, if airports can't fly, trains are cancelled, the whole thing's a disaster. And they're going, oh yeah, but we still want independence. And it's like, you voted for this already. How's it going to be any better? this is the best you're going to get. Are you going to get some super person to come in and say, that's better than Nicola Sturgeon somehow, and go and wave a magic wand and all the problems are going to go away? This is what
don't forget,
nationalism brings you. Sorry, it's quite a rant here.
It's a good one, though.
I was reluctant to interrupt you, but you're right. Well, what they'll say, of course, to that, in answer to your question, is the answer nationalists give is, oh, it's okay if you don't think the SNP are very good. As soon as we're independent, you can vote for anybody you like to run the country. Can oh, how nice. You mean it'll be almost like a democracy? Well, I'll tell you what, why don't you vote for anybody you like to be the Prime Minister in the UK? And all you got to do is win 326 seats, then you can be the party of government. So on you go, and best of luck with that, guys. So, yeah, it's been a dreadful, absolute failure from beginning to end, I would say. And I think that's what
I think what we're going to do, take a very short break, and we're going to come back and we're going to discuss a little bit more of this. And Niall is going to take the lead in this one.
Right, so just continuing onward from our discussion on Nicola Sturgeon's failures, which are too many to even, we've only got an hour, so we can't talk about them all. So to me, it's just astonishing that we've allowed Sturgeon to be the First Minister for this long. It's surreal that we've been living in this nightmare for so long, and it feels like so long. It's like we've got a 10-year mortgage for a house on Elm Street. And keeping on with the theme of spectacular Sturgeon failures, Jim Murphy has been he's been doing the Lord's work, to be honest, this week, and highlighting some systemic failures in the Scottish government. So if you'd be so kind, Mark, if you'd pull up Jim Murphy's thread. So this morning he had a thread about this the centralisation of powers and the culture of secrecy in ScotGov, and this is an achievement of hers. Is the level of secrecy, the level of centralisation that's happened in Scotland over her tenure, and he's had some amazing quotes in this thread. He talks about the coronavirus bill that would allow them to alter and amend any act of government in an event of emergency. What an emergency is, well, it's up to somebody's interpretation, of course. And
it's quite a long thread, actually, isn't it?
It's gigantic, this thread,
yes, really
but he is doing the Lord's work.
Yes.
So there is a clip in there as well. If you get to the clip, I'll make my way down.
Is this one the one you're talking about? It's
yes,
or the clapping seals one. Is it?
We can play Jim McCall if we go down a bit.
Oh, Jim McCall, yeah. I don't know if you can hear these.
This.
Can you hear that?
I can't, but I think you've got it muted, no?
No,
I can't hear. Right, this is
that's the one where he says that's a lie, right?
And it's the strong words, Jim. It's that's not true.
Yes,
it's hilarious. So, one of the scariest things that he brought up in this thread, and if this doesn't shock you, it should. So during COVID, when Scotland needed accurate info the most, the Scottish Health Minister tried to suspend freedom of information legislation, and this would have allowed ministers and NHS to operate in secrecy during the pandemic. For all their many faults, no similar move was even attempted by the UK government. So they're trying to go one and beyond the UK government. And this is something it's truly insane that when Nicola Sturgeon goes on and, I'm going to lead the most open, transparent, most accessible government in Scotland's history. Well, it's the opposite. It's transparent as a brick wall. I think
it's not. It seems like it's not an excuse to grab more powers. It should be an excuse to. It should be. I mean, they've used it as an excuse to grab more powers. This emergency coronavirus act, or whatever they call it, is basically a way where they can say, "Oh, there's an emergency, so we can just pass whatever law we like without any approval or oversight." Parliament approval or oversight. Like, I don't know. That's not the way the Parliament's supposed to work, So as a commentator says here, first thing they tried was stopping doing away with jury trials as well. It's quite, I mean, this is the thing. I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is that when you are involved in a national project, it's inevitable that things get centralised into into the centre. And that means that more and more power accrues to Edinburgh and less power is taken from local authorities. We see that money is taken from them and their influence and power is reduced all the time. And especially if those local authorities are SNP authorities, then you've got basically they just do anything that the SNP administration does. But this centralisation goes all the way. It centralises in Edinburgh, then it centralises in the SNP, then it centralises in the SNP inner circle. And I was reading an article yesterday where basically it said that Nicola Sturgeon basically only has 2 or 3 people she talks to. She doesn't talk to most of her ministers. They don't have a cabinet meetings. They don't have a functioning democracy inside their own party. So it becomes more and more. That's why nationalist governments tend towards like dictatorships, or not necessarily. Some people might say dictatorship. Oh, that's a bit harsh. But the idea that a single person is calling all the shots, and we can see that very clearly in the case of Nicola Sturgeon, where she is the one. I mean, you can tell when she's talking about her. She's pissed off all the time because the people around her just are useless. Or one of them is Yusuf.
He's beyond useless, and he's presiding over the Scottish NHS, which is on its knees. I think we'll be talking about that later on in the show. So
that's one of the things coming up.
It's absolutely ridiculous. Just continuing on Jim Murphy, and it goes on to detail the craziness of the Freedom of Information quest being sat on for months, right? So listen to this. A light was also shone on the role of SNP special advisors, or SPADs for short. In one dreadful example, the commissioner revealed a Freedom of Information request about the discharge of COVID patients to care homes, or from hospitals to care homes, had taken 8 months to answer because they sat with special advisors for at least 3 months before action was taken.
Yeah,
it's unacceptable.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a legacy, I think, as well, which we're talking about, is that, you have this, and we mentioned it last week, where we have this government by special advisors almost. And the special advisors, she's talking with special advisors all the time instead of talking to the ministers and talking to her cabinet, as it were, and all that. So you've got this kind of becomes a bureaucratic type of administration run by one person in a bureaucracy, and again, that's not very good for democracy in general. I mean, there's some good comments coming in here. Someone says, Tommy Boy says Sturgeon's a dictator. Could even be argued our ministers are so incompetent to make her look good. And I think that's actually quite true, because people are hired not for their competence, but for their loyalty to the party.
Yes,
quite.
Big Jim Murphy actually goes on to display that in his thread with a video of what he accuses the SNP of just being cheerleaders for Nicola Sturgeon. It's this one there. So I know there were audio problems on that one, but effectively the SNP MSP, he asked the wrong question. He asked he asked a question and Nicola Sturgeon gives a wrong scripted answer, but he doesn't say anything. He doesn't say, "Excuse me, Nicola, that's not the question." He just allows her to continue, and nothing's said, and it's all glossed over because it's all scripted, pantomime politics in Holyrood. It's it's unbelievable. I mean,
the question is, who's the back end of the horse? That's what I think. I mean, really, the front. I don't know. It's the Widow Twankey. Who is that as well? It is a bit like that. I mean, I think we could say that we have that since this administration's come into power, that I think most people will say that things have got worse. In fact, in the Times the other day, people were saying that they did that poll from YouGov, which basically said that only 38% of people are favour of Scottish independence now, and that as part of that, they didn't trust Nicola Sturgeon to handle the country's finances. And that's not very good at all. It really is.
Really interesting. And one of the polls also was that a majority of SNP voters would be in favour of Scotland keeping Trident, which is a real kind of teeth to Sturgeon and the Greens. I mean, really massively so.
Well, I think that's a matter of events. See, this is the thing. You keep this idea of nationalism in your mind. We're nationalists and we do these things, these age-old things. It was CND, first of all. Nicola Sturgeon was in CND before she was even in Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, before she was even in politics as a young nationalist, proto-fascist nationalist, whatever the symbol they have on the thing there. And, and now we're at a stage where the reality of the world events say, no, you can't actually do that, because if you give away that stuff, well, you can't actually get into NATO. You can't be a member of NATO. There was a really great article about this, in fact, just the other day. It said it's typical that nationalists want it both ways. They want to get rid of nuclear weapons from Scotland, which is the reason they're in Scotland is not just because we've got deep water bases, is because it gives immediate access to the whole North Atlantic. Yeah. And you can imagine you go to the United States and say, well, we don't want our bases in here anymore, but we still want to be part of their nuclear alliance. Like, I don't think so. It's just nonsense. So reality is catching up with their teenage dreams, and that's one teenage dream they've abandoned. So think about that. Actually, they've abandoned, this nuclear weapon stance. What's next to be abandoned?
Quite
maybe independence.
Could well be. If it doesn't prove any more popular in polls, there's no prospect ever of them getting even onto the first rung of the ladder to be given another referendum. Zero, no chance whatever. So, and they know that. So, is it possible that one day we'll see the SNP saying, "Vote for us"? We're not really independents, but vote for us anyway. I wonder. Would they?
That's interesting.
It's a possibility, David. I wouldn't run. You can't let them away with anything.
Certainly not.
Well, they might do. Fantastic comments. Where's the 600 grand Peter Murrow had?
Yep.
I think he's blown it on a cellar full of was it Castle del Diablo?
Exactly.
I don't even know what that is.
I think it's a wine. I think it's a
very nice wine. Okay. And, a wine of the devil. That's what it means. So it's,
I see. That's good. Right. We are going on. There was a thing about health somewhere or other. Where was that going? Do we have that?
Well, I mean, we were talking about the NHS earlier on. I mean, it is, and Humza Yousaf more specifically. Humza Yousaf is presiding over the NHS in its worst state. It was always declining prior to COVID, but the COVID has accelerated the process, I would say. And anecdotally, I can tell you there's a lot of nurses leaving the NHS. They're going to private companies because they're getting paid more, and it's having a knock-on effect. The more nurses that leave, the more that leave, and it's accelerating. And people are waiting and dying on ambulances. Come on, folks. We've had people die in Scotland waiting on ambulances. It's not acceptable. We live in one of the richest countries in the world, we're told, every single day by the SNP. We're not wee enough. We're rich. We can do this, we can do that. But we can't even save our own people here. It's not acceptable, folks. And the NHS will continue on its road to ruin so long as Humza Yousaf is at the helm.
But you know who hired? I mean, the question here, of course, is who hired Humza Yousaf. That's the thing. I'm going to finish up with this thought that I was thinking about. The Scottish government costs £600 million a year to run, right? So over Sturgeon's 7.5 years alone, it's cost £4.5 billion. And what have we got from it? We've got some baby boxes, some prescriptions which are paid for by the UK. The point here, what I'm trying to say is that it costs just to make those decisions, not actually to do the projects, right? Is that really good value for money? Can you say that if you went to someone and said, look, we built this building, it cost £400 million, The Parliament itself costs £100 million to run. The whole government, Scottish government, costs £600 million to run, and what you got out of it was a baby box and a free prescription you'd have got anywhere else.
Yeah.
This is just
value for
money. Put your counter in, or your comment in. Is the Scottish government? I mean, that's the thing you have to say. Is it providing value for money? If it was a Tory government or the UK government or Labour government, whatever, and they're spending all this money and not getting results, people will be up in arms about it.
Absolutely.
And they are, of course. But here, people get a pass.
See, we've had a horrible comment come in. It's not a horrible comment, but it's a horrible situation. Linda Ross, I have a life-threatening heart condition and couldn't breathe properly a few weeks ago. My son called an ambulance. He waited nearly 2 hours. So that 2 hours is, that's quite a short time. I've seen people waiting up to 40 hours on ambulances. But 2 hours is a long, long time. If you're having a heart issue, it's minutes, not hours, folks. Minutes.
That's really terrible. I feel sorry for people who are like Linda, who are in that situation. I mean, in fact, the thing is, we could all be in that situation. It's not like, okay, these are the people who are really sick, and that can happen. You can be in a car crash, or you could be listening to Nicola Sturgeon and die of fright, have a heart attack, and think you're going to die of fright, that type of thing. And then, I'm just joking. But then you wouldn't get your ambulance not arrive in time. That's not good at all.
We're playing politics with people's lives.
Yeah, all the while they're plotting away in the back of a napkin about the best way to get Scottish and get a referendum that won't come. Moving on, in a moment, we'll be talking about the most boring people on the planet. In my opinion, perhaps in your opinion also, that would be the Scottish Nationalists. Right, so every day I'm on Twitter, where you can follow us at the Majority Scot, fighting cybernats. You can follow my adventures and adventures of other people who are out there fighting. There are many of us on Twitter, and I think we're doing quite well. But it just amazes me the level of delusion and insanity I think was out there just today. And unfortunately, I would show you these tweets, but the guy blocked me. And because that's what happens. They tend to they say something, and then you say a few things back, and then they're like, I've had enough of this. But this guy was going on about, we're going to invoke the claim of right and the declaration of Arbroath, and we can declare ourselves as a sovereign people, independent right now. And you're like, I was talking about this at lunch, David. What do you think of this claim of right thing?
I mean, this is an act which passed in 1689. It's something to do with Scotland can claim to be a nation in its own right, or something like that. It was at the time of the just before the union took place, and this is what they're invoking now. In all seriousness, okay.
Oh, they did date it a little bit, and they come up with a thing in where is it here? Oh yeah,
1989.
Oh no, that's a different one. Oh yeah, 1988. That's what it was.
There you go. Yeah, it's on the 300th anniversary.
Claim of Right. Here you can see it. It's on the House of Commons Library. And the Claim of Right is a document drafted by the Campaign for a Scottish Assembly in 1988. It declared that the people of Scotland were sovereign and demanded a devolved assembly. That was it. And it wasn't even put into law. It's a political thing. It's not even part of the law. I mean, the thing is, go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is just gesture politics. That's all it is. So in 1988, of course, there was Thatcher. Her second government was in full swing with a massive majority, or a third government, in fact, it was 79, 83, 87. So that's probably where this came from. And of course, nothing happened, as you say, until Blair got in 97, and then he straight away, with Donald Dew's help, enacted legislation to deliver the settled will of the Scottish people. How did that turn out, guys? My God, Donald Dew would literally...
I mean, they've got this Declaration of Arbroath thing that they're always on about as well. I've got here.
Declaration of Arbroath, which is as long as a couple of dozen remain, we will never submit English,
kind of thing.
700 years ago.
How come they don't invoke the Edinburgh Agreement? Which
absolutely
was the result? Which said the result of the 2014 referendum would be decisive, divisive.
Absolutely right. Well said, Niall.
Well, that's the thing, right? And I mean, I think my point here so much is like these people are actually, they believe this. You know, I generally type stuff I believe, and you see but it's so many of them, and they're believing this. Okay, Declaration of Arbroath, claim of right, and then we've got the
Right.
UN thing. The UN is going to come and save them, and you know, I just don't get this. It's
outrageous,
like.
yeah.
Is the UN going to sanction the UK for letting Scots decide to remain in the UK in a free and fair referendum?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what
They always look for
that's what they're
like
trying to
some
say.
sort of greater foe, or a greater organisation. They see it as a union we're in, when it's actually the UK as a country. But
Absolutely.
in invoking the EU, will rejoin the EU, will join the UN. Well, I mean, it's just it's
NATO,
so farcical, so ridiculous. And why? What's the purpose and what's the objective here?
Well, I think a lot
do they
of
not
this,
want independence? They don't.
very true now. You're right. But they say they want independence, and then they talk about all these massive conglomerates they're going to join on day one. And they want to be independent so they can rejoin the European Union and surrender all semblances of independence. Utterly ridiculous. But Mark's right. It's the framing of the debate is so boring because they talk about this stuff. But again and again, they come back to this thing. Oh no, the UK is not a country. Scotland's a country. Scotland's a sovereign country. No, it's not, guys. And there was a nationalist, a separatist journalist. We know, I won't even name him because he's so insignificant. But he's talked about this week, and he said, "Oh yes, there are people who think Scotland is not a country, and people who think the UK is not a country, and both views have merits. Really, it has merit to say that the UK is not a country. Does it also have merit to say that the United States is not a country? How about Germany, which is an amalgamation of what was very recently two countries?
Italy or France or most all countries are amalgamations. I think people get confused a little bit because it says Scotland, right? But you know, there's the Kingdom of, I always think this, there was the Kingdom of Fife, right?
Quite right.
Know,
exactly.
it's a kingdom. Why doesn't it have its own independence movement as well? Just because it's a kingdom, right? Restore the king. And now, of course, there is some parody accounts on. Oh, I don't know if they're parodied or not on Twitter about that. I assume they're parody, and the guy who does the Kingdom of Strathclyde as well. You know,
right.
Well,
but
careful,
that's the farcical. Why are those farcical? As you know,
I say the same thing. What about Wessex? Wessex was a kingdom. So we give them an independent vote.
I mean, careful what you wish for. Dunfermline just had city status there, so you know, the Kingdom of Fife is coming up. I'm just saying.
Oh, don't.
It's coming up.
No, well, you know, that's the thing. Once you start, where does it stop? I read a good story, actually, short story, where basically, you know, the country was getting divided, and Scotland gets independence, and then, of course, Orkney and Shetland divided, and then next part divided, and of course, that's what it is, nationalism, and you end up with a kingdom of one person.
We end up back in feudal times when there's Argyll, and you know, it's just ridiculous. We're back in feudal times. Right.
But the thing that's interesting to me, I think, is that these arguments they seem to continue in the face of any kind of reality, and aren't the people making these? Are they immune to reality? And that's the thing. And you know, when you see this day after day, you know, this is just nonsense, and it's boring as well. And so for a few weeks there, I was like, I don't know if I can deal with these losers, because it's a tsunami of bullshit, right? And like Churchill said, he's a fanatic's one who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. It's like, but what is the thing that stops a person? Who's feeding it? The one thing I think we can answer that later, but the people feeding it, this self-delusion and this idea that they're going to be saved by the UN or some declaration from 700 years ago, it's complete nonsense.
It's straw clutching is all, as Mark, and it proves they've really got nothing left other than grasping at this complete nonsense. So really, it's barely worth even discussing this, but it's true. You hear it every day, but what strikes me is a lack of self-awareness. Are they not aware of how utterly absurd they seem coming across like this? I don't know if you remember the Channel 4 TV show Absolutely from about early 90s, where they had a parody of the SNP, and it was a little village council called Stonybridge, and he said they had all these exaggerated Scottish accents. We must find a clip of it, because more and more this is what it's turning into, seriously. So apologies if you don't know it, but if you haven't, look it up, because that's exactly what Scotland's becoming like.
Right. Well, anyway, I don't know what other people's experience of this is, but I just think nationalism, to me, it's an intellectual dead end, really, and
Here, here.
You know why it's boring, and so it's because it's the same debate
Yep.
done over the course of
Exactly.
whatever, 7 years, the same debate. I mean, come on, seriously, it's literally the same debate over and over again every single day, and it's non-stop. That's why it's boring. We've all reached the conclusion. It can't work.
Yep, indeed.
We've all reached the
Not going to
conclusion
work.
it can't work.
And in the meantime,
Right.
of course, Scotland is being destroyed, as we've just said
Yes.
previously in the show. So
On the road to it.
So a lot of people are saying things like, "We get all this, but how are we going to get them out?" Well, we will come on to that in the weeks to come. I promise you, we will.
Yes, of course, we do that. We do that all the time, of course.
Indeed we do.
Well, if all you're doing is fantasizing about an unrealistic future Scotland, we have a word for that, and that is hashtag indie wanking. Please don't do it; makes you go blind. You're certainly blind to reality. Anyway, so
Gives me hair in the palm of your hands too. Oh, hang on.
yeah, so we will move on to. Oh yes, it's time for the best part of the week. We hope glad you've been with us so far. We are about to go into the most amazing Zoomer of the week ever. Well, David, you're up, I think.
Okay, my Zoomer of the week for once. My nomination is not a separatist politician. This week, my nomination goes to one David Simpson, I think his name is. He is Scotrail's operations director. As we all know, on Monday, Scotrail launched what they called an amended train timetable, which they were forced to do as a result of train drivers' refusal to work on rest days, which is itself a result of an ongoing pay dispute. So the amended timetable has led to some 700 train journeys being removed from service, so just taken out completely, and no sign of them going back in. They need a lot more drivers. Jenny Gilruth, the Transport Secretary, has said they are committed to getting these drivers by the middle of next year, in all seriousness. Right, so day one of the new timetable, they're over at Waverley Station, TV camera, Mr. Gray's interviewed. I think, do you have the clip there, Mark?
Yes, I have it here.
Here we go.
Proving much more reliable so far. Punctuality has been above 90%. We've seen very few cancellations. The service has given customers the reliability, the consistency which they told us they wanted. That's in contrast to yesterday, where we had over 340 cancellations.
You couldn't hear that, guys. What the Ops Director of Scotrail just said was the new timetable is going really well. We've got over 90% punctuality. There have been very few cancellations, and the new timetable has given customers the reliability and the consistency they told us they wanted, in contrast to yesterday when there were 340 cancellations. So the way you give, when you've got customers complaining about cancellations and saying, I don't know which trains are running, dead easy, just stop all the trains running, and then they're going to have the certainty that they'll be able to get a train. I mean, guys, for heaven's sake, the only reliability and certainty that's been offered is the absolute cast iron guarantee that Scotland's rail service is not worth a light. It's ridiculous. But the idea that they could talk up these changes on the basis that slashing train services gives customers more certainty, I mean, to me, that's quite staggering. So, Mr. Gray, businessmen should never talk pitifully weak political spin when making dreadful excuses for appalling service levels. So there's a little life lesson for you. So you are my Zoomer of the week, Mr. David.
Oh, it's a real shocker. I think Niall's going to continue with the train hating just after this.
On the trains.
Just hold on.
Yep.
Got to get the graphics going.
You have to get the graphics. Sorry, guys. Right, so my Zoomer of the week is the Jenny Gilruth. Okay, so Graham Simpson, Scots Tory MSP, went after Gilruth, asking if she'd forgot that the buck stops with her. And her response was just unbelievably classic SNP. I don't drive the trains, she says. I don't drive the trains, look. Look, Jenny, we know that because the only thing that she's driving is the population nuts. It's outrageous. I can't believe it. And just on the trains, I was just going to say on the back of your Zoomer, David, people may have even bought what's called like a season pass on the train, or like a, and these things could cost hundreds of pounds, and because people commute to work, of course. So are they due a 30% reduction in their a refund, having had 30% of their trains cut? That's an interesting question to ask. But just back on to Jenny, we know she doesn't drive the trains. Come on. Just get people trained up and take some action on it, please. And at the moment, somebody pointed out, I think it was someone on Twitter, that there seems to be a de facto curfew in place for some areas if you don't have your own transportation. So I keep saying, I'm overusing the word outrageous, but there should have been a contingency plan in place for as Abellio transitioned to, nationalise Scotrail. There should have been a contingency plan over the course of months to phase it in. It shouldn't have been boom, and then the next week we've got all these cancellations and strikes. It shouldn't have happened like that. And it just, we've got the St Andrews Open Golf Championship coming up, David.
Absolutely.
I love golf, and so do you. So, I can already tell that this logistically will be a nightmare. Hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world descending on Scotland, in a wee place like St Andrews as well. It's shaping up to be a recipe for
St Andrews doesn't actually have a train station. So.
That's true, but there is a
people getting to Dundee, I guess.
Elsewhere,
I think is what you're saying. So okay. All righty. Okay, I don't drive the trains. That's quite something, isn't it?
I don't drive the trains.
When she was asked in Holyrood the other day, what about the Open when it's on St Andrews? And her answer was, oh yes, well I grew up in St Andrews, so I remember the Open very well. Yes, so you're quite right.
Yeah.
People are coming for their holidays and stuff like that.
Exactly.
What a disaster. And then, of course, the cheek to say to us, you better get out your car, because you're ruining the planet. There's no
there's no alternative.
Cycle to work, guys. Skateboard to work.
Okay. Right. All right, very good. Right, so my Zoomer is Tommy Sheppard, who MP, actually. He's complaining on Twitter. And there we have it. Labour have had the chance to work with progressive parties to deliver policies our residents voted for. Instead, they chose a backroom deal with the Tories. Unforgivable. I'm like, wait a minute, what does progressive mean here? Progressive doesn't mean fake socialism. Nationalism isn't progressive in any way. You can't say I'm going to draw an arbitrary line here and I'm going to take all the good stuff, all the stuff that makes me money or for me, and you can F off. That's not progressive. Dividing communities isn't progressive. Centralisation isn't progressive. Removing money from local authorities isn't progressive. And it goes on. The list can go on and on and on. How can this guy who he claims to be a socialist support any of that? Because he's hitched his wagon to this idea that Scotland, by increasing division with our neighbours, that we can get a more just Scotland. That's not the way it works. And these people really annoy me. These fake socialists. They go on about progressive politics. And their whole ethos and their whole party is about division and greed. It's really quite shocking.
Yeah, quite bizarre. How they get the cheat to call themselves progressive when some of the policies we've already talked about, which they've pursued, drug deaths, for example, utterly unbelievable. So,
the kids, we talk about kids' mental health and stuff like that, and all kinds of things as well. It's just the selfishness that really gets to me. The party's founders, they said we don't want to be conscripted into the English army to fight Hitler. Right? It's like, what kind of thing is that? There's an existential threat for the entire world, and there was an existential threat for the Jews, for example. And they're like, oh no, you're not going to fight for the king. And if that's how your party starts, it just keeps going on. And then, the oil, it's our oil. We want this oil money. Oh, we didn't get an oil fund like Norway. I saw a post today. It's like, it's just pure greed.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Absolutely right.
Anyway,
We're the only country that struck oil and got poorer. All right, okay. Well,
yeah, just greedy bastards. That's what it really comes down to. I mean, it is. I see these posts and the people are like, yeah, it's they stole our oil or they're stealing our wind or our water and stuff.
that's like water's a big one now, yeah.
Just greedy. No. Yep. Anyway.
Sours. You're not having it.
It's another great rant, Mark. You're firing. You're on all cylinders tonight. Yes.
Right. I'll say thank for that compliment there. So I'll let you actually, I was going to let David decide because he was away last week.
I was away last week.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. Okay. So you can decide as the dominers.
I very rarely go for my own choice, as you know, guys, and I'm not going to break that rule tonight. But Tommy Sheppard referred to me as being of questionable character the other week, so you get the gig. I mean, Jenny Gilruth is just the complete non-entity of the week and failure of the week. Sheppard gets Zoomer of the week because he was unkind to me when I suggested that the First Minister should volunteer to fill in the John Swinney pornographic children's sex survey. He said, "No, you're clearly of questionable character." No, there you go then. When in that case, you're clearly Zoomer of the week, Tommy. Well done, Mark.
Thank you. I don't often win, so I'm quite happy. Right, we are moving on to, thank you, Anne. We're moving on to close, and we're going to say a big thank you to the one and only Mary, who was on the show last week in David's place, and who is on the chat.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I've been kept really busy with comments tonight, and people had a lot to say about Nicola Sturgeon's failures over the last 7 years. Obviously, someone broke a mirror about 7 years ago.
I see. We should get you back on for that witty insight.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Big thank you to our donors who make this possible. If you like what you see, and you can donate into the podcast, go to our website. Up the top is a big donate button. Anything you can give would be great. But you can also support us in other ways. You can tell your friends. That's actually probably even more important than the donation. Hey, there's this great podcast where people actually talk about real issues that, from an anti-nationalist perspective, who else is doing that? Just us. We're here. Yeah. So come and see us every Thursday, 7 p.m. And, we read every comment that comes up, and we can't put them all on, but, that's part. We like to have you here.
And we've got one of the best audiences on the planet. We really do. Yeah. Some amazing comments, and I can't thank you enough for your amazing comments and input. It really does. It puts a smile on our face. It really does.
Absolutely. It's humbling as well, just to think that so many people are waiting for this to start so they can come and talk to us. And it's great to see the same names every week, a lot of the familiar names. And obviously, it's great to see new people too. But it's terrific to think we've got a lot of viewers. It's terrific. Really, really much appreciated, everyone.
It is. It's humbling. We started this actually, almost 6 months ago. This is number 25. And so we're very happy with the way it's been going. Big thank you to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation and all the other pages and people that do support us on Twitter, Facebook and other social media. I'm going to leave you with the thought of the week. It's not very complicated. It's just what basically I said before. Nationalism is greed. And if you see someone who's doing that behaviour, it's our oil, it's our water, it's all that, just hit them with that. That's a fundamental part of it. That is greed.
Yeah.
We'll see you again next Thursday. Good night from me.
Thanks, everyone.
Yep, a good night from me as well, yes.
Next week.
All right, take care, everyone. All right, bye now.
Bye-bye.